and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm making a flamenca using a Clio doll. I chose this fabric for the dress. First, I traced the pattern and cut it. I sewed the dots of both front and back, and then attached the shoulders. I made a flounce sleeve. To make the ruffle, I folded in half a strip of fabric and ironed it. Then I made a running stitch and gathered it. I attached it to the basic sleeve. I sewed both sleeves to the dress. I hemmed the neckline for a clean look. Cutting it is quite helpful. I folded everything, sewed the sides and turned it inside out. Then I made the flounce part of the dress. I drew the basic shape of the skirt on simple white fabric and made the ruffles as before, but using longer and wider strips of fabric. I had to make several of these and sewed all of them to the white base, overlapping them, and I ran out of fabric. I had to join the bodies with the skirt before I wanted, so some of the stitches were shown. I covered it with a straight piece of fabric. I closed the dress, folding it in the middle and sewing the bottom part. For the top, I added Velcro. And the dress is done. Now the accessories. I made a peineta. First, I drew the design on a piece of paper and I cut the basic shape in polymer clay. Then, with a needle tool, I carved the design. To be able to attach it to the doll, I used head pins. To make it curved, I placed it on a curved piece of aluminum foil to bake it. The earrings are also made with polymer clay. I cut 2 round pieces and made a hole in the middle, a little off-centered. I placed a little ball of clay and made a tiny hole with a needle. After baking, I noticed that the peineta was a little bit weak. So I covered it with a thin layer of Mod Podge to give it a little bit of strength. Once dried, I painted everything with several coats of red and another layer of varnish. I made a couple of roses too. I rolled a very thin piece of foam clay and let it dry, and inserted a piece of jewelry wire and secured it. For the petals, I covered a strip of fabric with a thin layer of Mod Podge and let it dry completely. I divided it in half to make two. I cut this wavy shape along the strip. Then I glued it around the foam piece. This way to make the rose was improvised. I usually make them easier using ribbon, but I didn't have the right color. I felt they were too thin, so I also glued 4 bigger individual petals on the outside part. Shoes now. I used air-dry clay to make them. I store my air-dry clay inside a Ziploc bag. This clay is a year old and it's as fresh as new. I like having a bit of water nearby. I molded the shape on my mannequin doll's foot. I carefully separated it and repeated everything with the other foot. They have to completely dry before continuing. As I didn't have the right color, I painted white fabric red. I made some patterns, drew them on the fabric and cut them. A bit of sticky tack helps keeping the vase in place. Then I glued the fabric parts. For the back of the shoe, I made a little loop. When the glue is dry, I cut the excess. Then I glued thin twine around it. Things get messy in this part. The soles were a bit ugly, so I covered them with flexible clay and painted them ochre yellow. To tie up the shoes, I used a little bit of thick thread. now the doll. I prepared her using the same steps as always. Cutting her hair, softening the vinyl of the head with hot water, and separating it by carefully pulling the body. Scraping the hair inside with a screwdriver and removing it with pliers. I cleaned her face with pure acetone. I left the scalp black, but I covered the parts that weren't painted. I rerouted her with yarn. I separated the strands and with my homemade rerouting tool, I inserted them in the holes. "20 years later, I finished. I secured everything with Tacky Glue. It's very important that all the plugs are coated with it. When it was fully dry, I brushed the yarn and made it soft with a hair straightener. To protect the hair, I covered it with a piece of scrap fabric. Then I joined back, head and body and sprayed the face with Mr. Super Clear. Now the face up. First, I shaded it with pastels. I have to confess that shading is what I like the least about repainting. And I blushed her. I started by drawing the basic shape of the eyes, using a color that's similar to the doll's skin tone. This time she's going to look to the side instead of to the front. The white pencil was working surprisingly good this time. For the mouth, I always start with a dark shade of the color of my choice between the lips. Then I draw the shape with a lighter one. I chose red this time. I drew the eyebrows too. Pay a lot of attention to symmetry. The next layers are just darkening the colors and adding details, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this kind of flamenco style while you see me repainting. In Andalusia, in the south of Spain, from April to September, each city and town celebrates its own fair. Each one is about a week long. The most important one is celebrated in Seville, In this fest, women usually wear these flamenco dresses. We actually call them traje de gitana, which means gypsy dresses. There are a lot of casetas, which are like venues where people dance flamenco, eat tapas and Andalusian dishes and drinks. I always hated the fest, to be honest, because I don't like flamenco music and I can't stand crowded places. But the dresses, oh, I've loved them since I was a little girl. In fact, this is me wearing one when I was 2 years old. For highlights, I like using a pastel pencil. I blended the pencil with my cotton glove. I painted the eyeliner with black. And darkened the eyebrows. This time I wanted to add a beauty mark next to the lips. I drew the eyelashes. First of all, I want to apologize because I was completely off-centered when I drew the top lashes and nothing could be seen, only a bit of my hand. So I can only show you how I drew the bottom ones. I'm truly sorry. Then I drew the pupils on a brand new layer. Finally, the reflections of the eye. I love how the doll changes only with these simple dots. The face up is done and I can reveal the hair under the cloth. Here you can see me struggling trying to style the hair. Everything I was doing was terrible. I had to do it off camera, it's just a simple bun. I curled the lock that I left outside the bun with a long and thick needle and a hair straightener. And then I cut the excess. And finally I can say that this doll is done. Making hair was great. I wanted to make a flamenca since I started customizing and I'm very happy with the results. I hope you like her too. Have a wonderful day and see you again very soon. Bye!